So, welcome to Elected, a podcast for women and our active accomplices in and around Canadian politics. It's always weird saying this with someone else because, we're talking into the never sphere of whatever. But today, my guest is Gil McGowan, the president of the Alberta Federation of Labour and a candidate for the leadership of the Alberta NDP.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
My introduction to you was actually I got to listen into an interview that you did on Alberta Primetime. I'm one of the political panelists, and then we had to comment on what your comments were. This was a while ago. I think just maybe a month more. I'm not sure. Time is abstract. But it was interesting having the opportunity to hear you speak. And then you had that really unfortunate launch, having had COVID.
Yeah, it was the worst possible way to start a leadership campaign. Yeah. And maybe I'll tell you the story because it's kind of entertaining in a twisted sort of way. But in order to be officially a candidate, you have to go through a vetting process. This is true with all political parties. And at the end of the vetting process is a meeting with a leadership committee. So this is the party, a panel, right? And the panel actually included Rachel Notley's husband, Lou Arab.
Okay.
Yeah. And
interesting.
And so I'd gone through all the hoops. I'd filled out all the papers. They had hired someone to vet my social media, which apparently took a lot longer than they were planning. But anyway, it was like a Wednesday evening. They had scheduled a Zoom meeting for me to meet with the panel. And we had a very nice discussion, and they decided at about 10:30 in the evening that, yes, it's okay. I could officially announce that I would be a candidate for the leadership. And so 10:30 at night on a Wednesday. And then so I was celebrating that and planning to launch my campaign the next day. But at 7:30 the next morning, I wasn't feeling well. I tested for COVID and it came back positive. And so
did you think maybe I'll just save it and wait a week until you didn't test positive and then launch, or you just wanted to get it out there?
Yeah. I mean, I was already lost into the race, right? Yeah. So, and I had a lot of ground to keep up. So you
didn't want to wait.
Yeah. I wanted to tell people that I was running,
right.
And, I saw no reason to but it did hold me back in terms of preparing the campaign and getting it out the door. So, I launched last, and I have a lot of ground to catch up, but my little team is working hard to do just that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you do kind of have a base of support, I would say, being the president of the Alberta Federation of Labour. And you said you have how many members?
Well, the Alberta Federation of Labour is the largest worker advocacy group in the province. We are a coalition of unions in both the public and private sector, and our affiliate unions represent 175,000 unionized workers in the province. So both the public and private sector, every corner of the province, every industry that you can think of.
Coalition is maybe actually one of my favorite words.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, and that's, it is a coalition, and as the president of the coalition, I had to learn to manage a large board of very strong-willed people who lead very important organizations, and each union has its own history and structure and priorities.
Right.
And so, that's one of the reasons I one of the things that I think I could bring to the table is my ability to manage groups of strong-willed people.
Stakeholders.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and if you want to be the premier of the province, you're talking about the ultimate a group of stakeholders, leader of a political party. In fact,
with an ultimately vocal caucus. All with different issues.
Exactly, and I've been doing that for 20 years successfully. Yeah. And I would point out that that my position right now is an elected position. I have to. I run for election and re-election every 2 years.
Okay.
And so I'm now in my 10th term. So either that means I'm doing a good job or no one else wants to do it. I prefer to think it's the former rather than the latter.
Right.
Yeah. And and so I point out that it's an elected position, first because, every 2 years there's a validation that the work that I've been doing on behalf of all these working people is appreciated, but also because there's a lot of negative stereotypes about unions out there.
Yeah.
I think, most people have heard them. And one of the things that we often hear is that I'm a union boss, and
it's kind of like mafia connotation.
Yeah.
Right? That you're like running this.
Yeah, but I'm not a boss. I actually work for our members, and they get a chance every 2 years to decide whether or not I'm doing a good job.
Well, that's it, right?
Yeah.
Because you are also a boss.
I am also a boss and of an organization.
Right.
And in fact, the Federation of Labour is a multi-million-dollar organization that does important work on behalf of working people. We stand up for public services. We stand up for jobs. We stand up for better wages and pensions, all these things that really matter for people. And I'm really proud that I've been able and honored that I've been able to spend my life, my working life, standing up for these important things for ordinary working people.
So there is another candidate in the race, Sarah Hoffman, who has that strong, I would say, worker forward campaign as well. I met her for the first time when she came in, when we did a podcast, and I loved her. Why would you, with someone who is so worker, like I would say labor leaning, like what you two are described as the labor candidates. Why get in the race when she already had kind of that agenda at the front and center of her campaign?
Well, with due respect to Sarah, I would say that she's labor friendly and labor adjacent.
Okay.
She's not a labor candidate.
Okay.
She's a friend.
Yeah.
And I say that I would say she's a friend of labor in the sense that she has been with us in many cases, and she's also a personal friend of mine. But honestly, the reason I threw my hat into the ring and the reason I did it last was because I was waiting to hear from the candidates that they had an agenda for the party, but also for working people. And frankly, I was not convinced that I heard that from any of them. And let me be very specific, right? Because this leadership race is an internal party leadership race. It is not a general election, and what we're deciding is on which leader can put us in the best position to win the next election. Obviously, to beat Danielle Smith in 2027. But my big concern as president of the Federation of Labour and a longtime NDP activist is that we're not addressing the real problem. And the real problem is that the party of workers is losing workers. But is that because of Danielle Smith? No, the UCP? Well, let me just flesh it out, because this is not just something it's just not just a feeling, right? I mean, so the Federation of Labour, as you can imagine, we're a big organization, and one of the things that we do on a regular basis is conduct polling on issues that are of concern to working Albertans. And we've been doing it on a quarterly basis for years. And what I've seen over the past 10 years is that working people are drifting away from the NDP. This is not to the UCP. Right. And this is not unique to Alberta. We see the same thing happening federally with Pierre Poilievre, who's making a direct play for working class Canadians. We see it south of the Singh's boat is, full of holes in terms of and the holes are leaks to the UCP. Exactly. And the same, but to the federal Conservatives. Yeah, and obviously the same thing is happening south of the border with Trump. Yeah. But what our polling for Alberta's largest worker organization has been telling me is that it's happening in spades here in Alberta. And so we took a poll before the last provincial election. We just came out of the field with another poll. And what the polling tells us is that Albertans who identify as middle class and who have university education are voting strongly for the NDP. But Albertans who identify as working class and who have college trades and and high school education are voting for the UCP, and often by wide margins. And so, as someone who cares about the party, someone who cares about working people, and someone who desperately wants to see Danielle Smith become an ex-premier, that worries me. And so when I threw my hat into the ring, it was explicitly so that I could draw attention to the fact that we're losing working people. And my argument is
From
that
the party.
from the party, right? And so, and my argument is explicitly that in order to build, like Rachel's built this tremendous base, political base, but it has a hole in it, and that hole is working people. And unless we fill that hole, we won't be able to build the coalition we need to beat Daniel Smith in 2027 and beyond. And it's the beyond that I'm worried about, right? Because in the last election, the New Democrats, they identified a very narrow path to victory for themselves. They basically had to win all the seats in Edmonton, all the seats in Calgary, and then that would just barely get them over the line to get a majority.
Well, and so that's maybe, but I see that as there's a working class aspect that you're talking about, but it was really what you're getting, I think, going to is the rural aspect, right? You have to win rural Alberta as well. So those are two prongs that are missing.
This is where it's a gut punch for me, Sarah, because not only am I a worker advocate, I'm a farm kid. I grew up in rural Alberta. I learned how to drive a tractor before I learned how to drive a truck. My first job for pay off the farm was in a feedlot, where I learned the...
Where are you from in Alberta?
From our farm was north of Westlock, so that's north of Edmonton. And so I went to elementary and junior high school in a place called Clyde, Alberta, population 250. I went to high school in Westlock, which has been in the news, and we can talk about that. And that's the town where there was a plebiscite to get rid of a pride sidewalk that was narrowly won. But that's one of the reasons. Like I come from rural Alberta. I grew up in rural Alberta. I still have family members in rural Alberta, and so when I see the NDP, the party that I've been a member of since I was 16 years old, and I see the NDP losing because they can't get support in rural Alberta, and they're losing support among working people who I represent, that's a double gut punch for me.
Because you see yourself in that.
I see myself in that.
And family and
my
friends.
family. And because of my personal history, growing up in rural Alberta, becoming a worker advocate, and being really proud of both of those things. I feel like I'm, on a personal level, I'm uniquely well suited to address the problem that needs to be addressed, and that's to fill that missing piece in the coalition so that we can win the next election.
Well, I mean, you have the debates coming up. I do think this is a message that would resonate with people watching, because there's one thing to have a name and to bring that kind of energy to a campaign. It's another, I think, to actually talk about, like, there's a difference for me in that, because there's a lot of fanfare around Nenshi, for example, right? I don't necessarily see that translating to success in 2027.
That's my big concern. I actually think that Naheed is the embodiment of the gap that has been growing between the NDP and voters outside the big cities and the working class voters who are being lured over to the UCP.
Right.
I think as a party, our focus should be on bringing working people back to the Workers' Party. And I think there's a big irony here. Like the NDP was established explicitly in 1961 as a partnership between the old CCF, representing farmers primarily in Western Canada, and the Canadian Labour Congress, representing workers. But it's exactly those two groups who have drifted away from the party, and this is a much more fundamental problem than the way it's for the party than the way it's being cast by some people. Because I get this. People have it's a natural human tendency to try to put a positive spin on losses, right? And so when
you always want to spin it to your benefit.
To your benefit. And so what I heard from many of my fellow New Democrats after the 2023 election was that it was actually not a loss; it was actually a victory. We got more votes than we ever had. We have the biggest opposition in Alberta history, and we only lost by a handful of votes, less than 2,000 votes in 6 ridings in Calgary. I think we've all heard that.
I think it makes it all the more painful, to be honest.
It does make it more painful, but if we fixate on that, it's a situation of fighting the generals fighting the last war, right? because 2027 will not be 2023. We can't assume that the people who voted for us in 2023 will vote for us again.
Yeah.
And there's also, some troubling things that we have to get our heads around.
Well, I mean, some of the people who voted for the first time in my life
Yeah.
for the NDP in the last election, like, and so in your worker forward thinking of, bringing back that vote to the
Yeah.
NDP, would that be at the exclusion of more centrist people like me?
No, in fact, I think that the way I would frame it is that the vast majority of Albertans are workers. And
We all work.
Yes.
Right?
Well, I want to make an important distinction though.
Okay.
For me, a worker is someone who can't go without a paycheck.
Right.
And, like they're, well, it's most people,
Yeah.
but not everyone.
Well, I mean,
right?
sure. Okay. Yeah.
So
Mark Zuckerberg is not,
exactly. Right. And you're a small business owner. You work hard, but your capital versus labor, right? And most people are labor. Yes. And I love your shop. You are your own labor. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of your shop. I'm just looking at this bag saying, we'll be less activists if you be less shit, right? And I could see a lot of our own members carrying picket signs that say that at rallies. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be great if they bought the tote too, but yeah, that idea of, that friction of me being just, a business owner rather than, so even in that I can hear, that's a separation of who I am, right? Versus who you might want in your coalition.
Right. Well, I want to make it really clear. The coalition that Rachel built is a broad one, and it is.
So you're narrowing it.
No, actually, where all the candidates agree is that in order to win in 2027, we have to attract more people to the party.
Right.
Where we disagree is on the strategy. And for, the implied strategy from Naheed Nenshi, for example, and from many of the other leadership candidates is that we have to appeal to everyone to make it a big tent. What I'm saying is that we need to be more strategic and figure out who's not in the tent and then appeal to them. And what the polling tells us very explicitly is that the people that are not in the tent are people who identify as working class, who have college, trades or high school education. They're working people both in the big cities, but also outside of the big cities. And I know we lump them all together and say it's rural, but having come from rural Alberta, I can tell you it's a lot more complicated than that. We have smaller cities like, Grand Prairie, Red Deer, Medicine Hat. We have smaller communities like the town where I went to high school, Westlock. And what the voters in those areas want is it's not uniform, right? So what I'm saying is that in order to get it's the working class and that's about 30. Well, the working class can be defined by income, but it's also a state of mind, right?
You would definitely.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing: I actually think that small business people have more in common with working people than they do with big business. I mean, like one of
I'm not WestJet.
Yeah. Right? Well, but it's not just a question of big, it's also about control. So take someone like Amazon, right? Okay. Amazon actually doesn't sell things themselves.
Well, they did.
They become
originally,
but they sold books. But they've become a platform from which small businesses, people like you, sell things. And so
Shopify is a Canadian example of an Amazon, right? They don't actually. Yeah. I tried to make this point maybe ineffectively this week, because the founders of Shopify are moaning about the proposed increase on capital gains in the federal budget.
Yeah.
I don't see asking people who make the most to pay more. I don't see as a problem, right? Because it's like, oh, should I get one yacht or two?
Yeah.
That's a problem that I wish all of us had, right? But it's the problem of very few.
Yeah.
But, and the attention and focus put on them, like it's actually businesses like mine that power their profit. As a user of Shopify, Shopify is a platform. Yeah. If every user like me was to walk away from the platform and we were to take, all of the customers that are attached to each one of our businesses, their stock price would collapse, right? Yeah. It's So they're not
Well, this is
actually,
my-
it's what we make it
Yeah.
as small businesses, what we make their business to be.
Well, this is the point that I was making, that small business people actually have more in common with working people than they do with the owners of these big platforms. Yeah. And actually, there's a Canadian author named Cory Doctorow. In fact, he's going to be in Calgary on May the 3rd to give a little speech about his latest book. But he came up with a word about these big digital platforms, which I love.
Okay.
And the word is inshitification. Okay. And what he's basically saying is that these are the monopolies of the new age, right? And they're not selling things; they are selling access, right? And so, in the same way that a big employer might use their market power to squeeze workers by driving down their wages, these platforms are inshitificating everything. That's his word, by squeezing small businesses. So in order to sell to your customers, who increasingly are found online, they pay more. They're and that's why I say that, like, small businesses and workers are sort of in the same boat.
100%. Yeah.
And so, but here's the thing: I feel that the New Democrats would do better. And this is one of the reasons I've thrown my hat into the ring to be leader. The New Democrats would do better in terms of attracting working people, both in the cities and outside, back to the party, filling that piece in their coalition. And if they actually went to where the workers are. And right now, working people in this province are incredibly stressed by the rapidly rising cost of living. Like here in Alberta, we have the dubious distinction of having the highest rate of inflation among all provinces and the slowest rate of wage growth.
That claims to be, the most friendly to business and the most competitive.
But highest level of inflation at the same time, lowest rate of wage growth. We used to have the highest wages in Canada by a long shot. Like 10 years ago, our average wages were about 20% higher. And right now, that advantage has almost entirely disappeared. And I would argue that that's the result of what I would describe as a deliberate wage suppression strategy on the part of the UCP. So, for example,
they can't suppress. It's really, large employers who are really driving, that.
Well, let me explain my thinking, okay? Because the numbers bear it out. We had higher wages, and then it has been slowly. Other provinces have been slowly catching up to us, but our wage growth fell off a cliff in 2019. And what happened in 2019? The UCP was elected, and what did they do? They froze the minimum wage, and so it's been frozen now for 5.5 years. We used to have the highest minimum wage in the country. We now have the second lowest. This period was a period of high inflation. Inflation has gone up by 15% in the last 2 years, and our minimum wage has not. So what was supposed to be a floor to hold all workers up has become an anchor to drag them down. And our provincial government has actually told me explicitly they have no intention of ever raising it. And so that's one thing.
The minimum wage.
The minimum wage. So as long as they're in power, they don't see any need to do it.
Well, because they feel that that would be the private sector, right? That's not something that they would.
But so if that were the only problem, they also introduced a $2 an hour lower minimum wage for young people. So even if they're doing the same kind of work, they get paid less than older people. Yeah. But you take what they've done with minimum wage.
Older, experienced.
Yeah, but a lot of the people who are earning that kind of wage, it's not a question of experience. You're just moving things from one place to another. You're stocking shelves, right? That's what you do on a daily basis. Yes, right. I'm sure you do it very well. Yeah. But my point is that if you put together the frozen minimum wage with the fact that they've made it much harder for people to join unions and bargain collective agreements. They've introduced rules that make it easier for employers to avoid paying overtime, and then they've, for a large part, they've put a freeze on wage increases in the public sector. Right. You put all those things together, that's a wage suppression. These are choices made by the government, right? And
political ideology.
Yeah, driven by their political ideology, and this is at a time of rising inflation. So we've got pressure coming down on wages for working people in this province at the same time that costs are rising. So working people are squeezed, and to come back to the question of the New Democrats and how they win the next election, if we accept what the polls are telling us, which is that working people are not voting for the NDP, and that if they did, there would be a larger, more robust coalition. The question is, how do you win more working people, both in the cities and outside?
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that that we don't have to stop being who we are. And like the New Democrats are the party of education, they're the party of healthcare, the party of human rights. I'm proud of that, and that reflects our values. But we also have to become the party of wage growth. We also have to become the party of affordability. We also have to become the party with a clear economic plan that will allow us to prosper even as the world changes, right? And those last 3 points are not what we're putting in the window. We're instead of talking about our plan for the economy and instead of putting policies forward to reduce costs and make life more affordable, we're allowing conservatives to lead us around by the nose, and we're becoming responsive to their priorities. So whether, it's the culture war stuff, right?
Yeah, it is culture wars. It's like it's politically astute you could say it's politically astute because, Polyev, Smith, they see opportunities in attracting people to their, to vote for them, right?
Yeah.
It's up to the other parties to try and either win them back or retain them.
Yeah. But what I'm hearing from our members, and so I have conversations with the workers that we represent on a regular basis. I also get out of my bubble on a lot of opportunities and have lots of interactions with non-union workers and employers. And I'll get into that because I actually have a lot more experience in business and public policy and economics than a lot of people would think, but I do. But what I hear from working people is that, and when I say this, it'll probably ring true to you because I'm pretty sure you've heard this from people before.
Okay.
So what I hear from a lot of working people, both union and non-union, is that they don't particularly like Danielle Smith or the UCP, but they're going to hold their nose and vote for her
100%.
because the economy, right?
But they're actually not good on the economy.
But and that's my point. And then people will also say, well, the NDP is going to kill the golden goose. They're the goose that lays the golden egg.
You mean the oil and gas?
The oil and gas industry. Those two things are killing us, right? And as president of the Federation of Labour and a longtime New Democrat, you can imagine I describe myself as an inside outsider. So I'm not an MLA.
Right.
I'm not a party official, but I'm a longtime New Democrat. And
you're a very important stakeholder to the NDP.
Especially because the party was a historic partnership between the CCF and the labor movement. So I'm often on the inside.
Right.
When the party,
insider.
I am an insider without a seat. So an inside outsider. But because my primary allegiance is to the labor movement, right? But we're partners because that's why the labor movement partnered to create the party, because we wanted working people to have their own voice in politics.
We talked about this before we started recording. So that my political history from BC is as a BC Liberal, which would be, most people would
conservative here.
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
Cool with that. But, I would, the party of anti-labor, right?
Yes.
That's how we were portrayed.
Yeah.
I would argue that is not entirely accurate. But the idea that the UCP is actually good for the Alberta economy, I think is fundamentally incorrect.
I agree with you 100%. And I wish the New Democrats were shouting that from the rooftop, but they don't. I don't know why and that's one of the reasons I'm running. Missing
from the last election.
Yeah. I mean, the last election was a particularly bad example of what we do wrong. And I want to preface that by saying, I love Rachel Notley, incredible amount of respect for her. What she's been able to accomplish for the NDP is sort of beyond, like I grew up in. But the last election was an election about nothing, right? I mean, we told people what we were against, but we didn't say what we were for. And I guess
the people in the room making those decisions definitely saw that as an effective strategy, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't have implemented it.
Yeah.
They thought that was their path to victory.
But there were people on the inside, including myself, saying, we got to talk about the economy. We can't cede the field on the economy to the UCP.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 100%. There's a really strong story to be told that progressives are better at the economy than conservatives, especially in the Alberta context. I mean, we saw it just right after the election. What was one of the first things that Danielle Smith did as our new UCP premier? She put a moratorium on investment in renewable energy.
Yeah.
You know,
That
she
doesn't make sense.
chased away between $30 and $300 billion in projects.
It's fundamentally
Right?
in opposition to
Yeah.
building a strong economy.
Yeah.
You don't put your hand up and say no investment. I don't want.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
But see, like working people in this province,
yeah.
the economy, they need to hear a story on the economy that is compelling and that reassures them.
Maybe you just need to swap out workers and put in Albertans.
Yeah.
Right?
But my point is, and like strategically, we have to acknowledge what the polls are telling us. The polls are telling us that people who identify as working class
that focus will ultimately turn away that portion of the population that you need to bring on side in your vote coalition in order to defeat.
Well, let me ask you,
2027.
let me ask you, you would define yourself as a middle-class small business owner,
yes.
right? Probably with a university education. You do,
Yeah.
right? And you're an urban dweller, right?
Yeah,
And
a rural place in
Yeah.
BC though.
Yeah.
Former 4-H member. Like,
right.
you
But my
know.
point is that you're disgusted with the UCP.
Yeah.
You are not going to go and vote for the UCP. So what I'm saying is that that we should celebrate the fact that we've won the support of middle-class, university-educated people in urban centers. And I'm not in any way suggesting that we should do anything to chase them away. In fact, the New Democrats are the party of the things that those kind of voters value. So we're the party that will defend public healthcare, public education. We see the value of supporting our universities.
The points about language can be off-putting, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, to you know, your definition of worker and my definition of worker, that could ultimately lead to, you know, people misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's for me, it's not saying that we're the workers' party, it's showing them.
Right.
Okay. And so, and I make a distinction also between what I'm doing now as a candidate for the party leadership and what I would do as party leader in the general election.
You also said that you earlier on, I think on the Ryan Jesperson podcast around wanting to be like the Peter Lougheed of.
Yes.
And okay.
I said I aspire to do what he did with our economy.
Okay.
Yes.
First of all, as a BC transplant to Alberta who's lived here for 12 years, I do not understand the fucking infatuation with Peter Lougheed and Ralph Clyde. Like, it is maddening that people in Alberta seem to be, if you were born and raised here, there's an obsession with them and emulating them and wanting to like, no, I'm more Ralph Clyde than you. No, I'm more Peter Lougheed than you. I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
I want to talk about building Alberta in 2023, 2024, 2027 and beyond. And this idea that we have to go back and that there are these two men that loom over everything in Alberta politics. What is it that was so great about them? Like, I don't understand. So
I can explain it. Yeah.
Aspire to be someone from the 1980s. Like
it was actually the 70s.
Okay, 70s, 80s. How does that translate into a vision for modern day Alberta?
To be clear, I don't want to turn the clock back to the 70s, and I don't even want to be Peter Lougheed, but I think that there are lessons from the Lougheed era that are very applicable to the current moment. And explicitly, it's about the role of government in the economy. So at the time in the 70s, the big fear was that we were running out of conventional oil and gas. So keep in mind, this is before fracking. This was before the oil sands. And we were
a mining engineer.
Yeah. Actually. So we were rich because we had this thing called the Western Sedimentary Basin. Yes. We had all sorts of oil and gas.
It's out of the ground.
Yeah. And but conventional oil, the stock of conventional oil was running down. And so Peter Lougheed asked the question, what next? Mm-hmm. And for him, the answer was oil sands and petrochemicals, but they were both nascent industries. There was only one oil sands facility. There was a couple of petrochemical facilities but they were not the big industries that they are today. And he went to the oil industry that he was very close to, and he said, let's pivot. And they said, no, thank you. Because incumbents don't like change. They tend to look backward instead of forward.
Money doing what you're doing presently.
Yeah.
Why would you spend money to do
Exactly.
something different?
Yeah. And but that's exactly, we're at a crossroads like that right now too, because we are at the front end of what is probably the biggest economic shift since the Industrial Revolution. The oil now finally has a competitor in renewables creating electricity. And all sorts of forecasters are suggesting that demand for the stuff we sell is going to plateau and start falling, whether it's 10 years from now or 20 years from now. It's not a question of if, it's when, right? So in the same way that Lougheed was at a crossroads and he decided that he went to the industry, says we can't count on them to pivot us towards new opportunities.
Right.
So he used what is now referred to as active government-led industrial policy, right? So he introduced regulations to make sure that there was more in-province development. He used public money to do research, to develop technologies that were commercialized. And he used public ownership. He created the Alberta Energy Corporation that partnered with Syncrude and with a whole bunch of the petrochemical facilities. He used public money to develop an ethane gathering system to provide feedstock for the petrochemical industry. I'm not saying that that I want to become Peter Lougheed. I'm not saying that I want to do exactly what he did. But what I'm saying is that what we need right now is activist, government-led industrial policy to pivot our economy to the future. And
the communications person in me wants to,
beat me over the head. Yeah.
Change how you present that.
Yeah.
But I mean, positioning Alberta.
But this is why it's
future,
right? And that's what I say. I boil it down that the New Democrats should be the party that pivots the economy towards the future. That's literally
it can be a scary word.
It can be,
because that actually might turn off that pivot.
Yeah.
That pivot is what and how it's framed is what is turning people away from progressive parties and towards conservative parties.
Well,
because they're afraid of what that means.
Yes, and working
are being affected, right?
Yeah.
Automation.
Well, let me tell you.
The guy, a hauler in the oil sands making, maybe $150,000 a year and sees autonomous trucks in his future.
Yeah.
Right. That's the guy who's going to the Conservatives.
Yeah.
The UCP and Poilievre.
So protect my job, protect my industry.
Right.
Yes.
Autonomous trucks are happening.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. These are our members. Yes. I'm very familiar with it. Yeah. 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 Well, let me. Well, let me make a bold statement.
Okay.
If I were the leader of the NDP, I would present ourselves as the party that will save our oil and gas industry.
Oh yeah, that is bold.
Yeah.
That is bold. Okay.
And let me tell you.
Are you going to say that on the debate stage?
I probably will.
You should.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should use that.
Because what I'm proposing, because I talk about industrial policy, right? So Lougheed used government intervention to pivot towards opportunities. The same thing is happening south of the border now with the Biden administration, the Inflation Reduction Act. They're using big government intervention in the economy to pivot towards a lower carbon future. And it's attracting trillions of dollars of investment.
But not votes. Like there's a very real threat that Donald Trump could win. And it's not because he's going to do any of these things or save the economy. People just have the idea of him as some kind of savior.
But here's
the same way Danielle Smith's not doing anything for the economy. Right?
Yeah. Well, but here's why I say that we could cast ourselves as the party that would save oil and gas.
Okay.
Because the trends are clear. Demand for oil and gas is probably going to go down, but it's demand for oil and gas as fuels, right? That's combusted and creates emissions, right? But there is a big market for oil and gas for materials that includes petrochemicals, but also things like carbon fiber.
Right. Has petrochemicals in it.
Right. And bitumen is a unique resource that's uniquely well suited for materials. So if we were actually to use government-led industrial policy to pivot the oil and gas sector towards producing feedstock for materials rather than fuels, and not only would we maintain the demand for the resource, and we have an interest in doing that because we own the resource. So if demand goes down, we lose the value of the thing that we own. And this is why Peter Lougheed, and I know you don't want to be referred to Peter Lougheed.
No.
He famously said, we own the resources, so we should think like owners.
It's a puzzle for me. Like people, it's like a pissing contest. Like, no, I'm more Peter Lougheed than you. No, my politics Ralph Klein than yours. No, I'm going to emulate him more. But it drives me crazy.
I want to come back to the point about the NDP being the party to save oil and gas. with in brackets from itself. Right?
Is the only premier to have delivered a new pipeline, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's a considerable achievement.
It's a considerable achievement, but I think there's a bigger achievement that could be ours if we chose to make it, right? And so if we were to take this approach of taking a more active role in the economy through the government on behalf of Albertans, we could pivot towards materials from fuels. Not only would that benefit people in the existing industry, because we maintain a demand that we might be losing as the rest of the world wants less oil and gas, we can create demand in the province and create a manufacturing industry next to the oil and gas industry. So we could create a whole new industry that turns our resource into things like petrochemicals, things like carbon fiber, asphalt binder. There's all sorts of uses, right? And other oil and gas producing jurisdictions are making that pivot right now, including places like Saudi Arabia. My fear is that if we don't move towards materials, the world is going to be demanding less for fuels and price will collapse.
So you just want to get ahead of it.
I want to get ahead of it. I want to do it before the Saudis do it.
Okay.
And but the incumbents have made it really clear that they're not interested. So it's the same story going back to the 70s. The incumbents were fat and happy. The incumbents today are fat and happy.
Do you put your other leadership race contenders into that category of not putting forward these ideas?
Yes, I do actually. And once again, I'm not going to say that I'm any better or smarter than them. As president of the Federation of Labour, I've actually
that would not be a good strategy.
No. But I mean, as president of the Federation of Labour, I've had unique experiences, right? Like by virtue of my position, doors have been opened, opportunities have presented to me that have given me insight into our oil and gas industry. So, for example, well, first of all, I represent a lot of people in oil and gas, but during the Notley government, I was appointed as the co-chair of something called the Energy Diversification Advisory Committee. It's a mouthful. EDAC for short. The government is really good at making unwieldy game. And so I spent 18 months co-chairing with someone from business. Jeanette Patel from GE Energy. We were co-chairs, and we worked with a business and labor panel, right, and a whole bunch of energy experts, engineers, economists. We spent 18 months coming up with recommendations about how to diversify our oil and gas system within oil and gas, and it was mostly based on petrochemicals. And so we came up with a whole suite of recommendations, almost all of which were implemented by the Notley government. Some of them were actually implemented later by the UCP government, and collectively they created thousands and thousands of jobs in one of our most important industries. So, and then more recently, I through the labor movement and especially our unions representing workers in oil and gas related construction, manufacturing, we created this thing called the Industrial Policy Coalition, and we put together a blueprint for pivoting the Alberta economy towards new opportunities. And we call it skate to where the puck is going. So once again, I'm borrowing the phrase attributed to Wayne Gretzky. So I don't know, you don't like Peter Lougheed. Yeah. You don't like Peter Lougheed. I don't know how you feel about Wayne Gretzky.
Perhaps by default. So like the whole Alberta thing. And I am was born in the 80s. So I mean, I see the hype.
You got the tail end of it.
Like from a feminist perspective, this idea, like
all these male icons. I get it. Yes.
Female icons, but yes.
But so we came together this blueprint, and we shopped it to the federal government, and now I'm going to introduce a powerful, influential woman.
Yes.
Okay, Chrystia Freeland.
Right.
Okay.
As the finance minister.
The finance minister. And so she was looking for some inspiration for diversification.
Yeah.
And we came to her with our skate to where the puck is going report, and we talked about government-led industrial policy, pivoting towards materials, tying strings to government money to make sure that the money was spent locally, hiring local businesses, building local supply chains, paying union wages.
Policy.
A buy Canada,
build Canada.
Well, also pay people well, a Canadian policy. Yeah. So we brought that to her.
What Joe Biden's done in the States.
Similar,
right?
yeah. And so we were coming to her at almost exactly the same time as the Democrats in the States were introducing the Inflation Reduction Act. And there was a lot of excitement about that. So we hit her at exactly the right time. And she embraced the vision that we were presenting to her. She was already thinking along similar lines, but she came out to Alberta. She met with our industrial policy coalition. She actually several meetings, two of which lasted for like 4 hours at the Boilermakers halls in Edmonton and Calgary, where we talked about pivoting the Alberta economy, diversifying the Alberta economy, updating Lougheed for the 21st century. And she really liked it. Yeah. And in the 2023 federal budget, she used a lot of our language in her budget speech. And as a former political staffer, you know how hard it is to get more than a couple of sentences in a budget speech.
Can make someone very happy just to hear a few words.
Right. And so we got whole swaths.
Yeah.
And also more importantly, more billions of dollars of investment tax incentives that were earmarked for diversification projects. The first big one was the net zero hydrogen plant outside of in Fort Saskatchewan, the Dow, and our fingerprints were all over that. So my point is, okay, this is not just notional. Okay, like I've been working in this space for a very long time.
Yeah,
I have a vision for pivoting our economy. And maybe I'll take your advice. Pivots, maybe not the preparing our economy for change, right? Because one of my operating principles
matter.
They do,
right? And they can really bring people along, or they can turn them off.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And
you can for debate prep.
Yes, I've got a few days, so maybe I will. Yeah. But the word is prepare, right? And I think what my experience talking with our members in oil and gas here in Alberta tells me is that most of them buy the argument that change is coming.
Yes.
They're anxious about it.
Some of them are.
Many of them. They're worried about it. But the thing that they all agree on is that it's better to prepare for change than stick our heads in the sand and get run over by it. Right.
Yeah.
So bringing it all back to the NDP leadership race, I think we can win the next election and win over the missing working class supporters who are the big missing piece in our coalition. I think we can do that by becoming the party that will prepare our province for change.
Yeah.
That will make sure that we have prosperity going forward like we've had in the past.
Yeah.
That we're prepared for a future that's going to look different than our past. Right. But we have to talk about it.
Yeah.
And we haven't been.
Well, I mean, I think this positions you actually rather uniquely because, I mean, all of the conversations I've had with all six of you and before Racky dropped out, is that you all kind of have your own, lane, right? Yeah. You're very unique in yours in the conversation that we've just had. And no one else is talking about it in the way that we just did.
Yeah.
So there's value in that because it will resonate with a lot of people. And I think going back to I've been talking with each of you. I just assumed that in my conversation that you would be the leader of you're going to win and you are running against Danielle Smith. Mm-hmm. In each of the conversations I've done that. And I do think that there's a compelling argument to be made that would find votes in that, right? Is it broad enough to actually win in 2027 though?
My approach?
Yeah.
I know that you and others are skeptical because I'm talking about workers.
Well, because I think Albertans instead of saying just workers, I think you should use Albertans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But once again, I make the distinction between what New Democrats need to hear right now,
right,
when they're making a decision about who should be the next leader and what we would do in the general election. These are two very different things. And what I'm trying to say to
extensions for the campaign, he's to me, he's in his car and you all are in the rearview mirror, right? Yeah. And he's built this campaign around for Alberta, right?
Yeah.
Which
I find a little bit
from him actually.
Yeah.
Right.
But
a little bit.
But once again, I just want to emphasize that what I'm trying to tell my fellow New Democrats is that in order to win, we have to fill that missing piece in our coalition. That missing piece in the coalition are working class people. I get it. I really do hear you. I really do hear you. But my point is that this is before we make decisions about what the general election campaign is going to look like.
Yeah.
We have to have a strategic target. The strategic target has to be
Albertans.
No, but we're already resonating among university educated urban Albertans.
Right.
Okay. And our message of
Albertans, right?
yeah, well, so
I mean,
I'm trying to say that and you work for a party, so you understand strategy. So the question that we should be asking is who's not in the tent right now? We should have an answer for that. And then we say, what do we need to do to bring that group of people into the tent?
I think I'm seeing what I see is you saying your tent is for these people.
No. I'm saying we've got a really big tent and we need a few more people in it in order to win the next election and beyond. Who's out there? And what do we say to them? Because they're being lured away by the Conservatives right now. So what do we need to say?
I want the tent's exclusive.
But it's not exclusive. I'm saying we've got this big tent with a whole bunch of people. There's people outside. The things that we say to the people in the tent already obviously have not been enough to bring those people. So we have to talk to the people who are outside the tent. And before we can talk to the people who are outside the tent, we have to know who they are. And they are working people with college, trades, and high school education. And so we need, and what they're worried about is their own personal economy. They're worried about paying their bills. They're worried about the cost of living. And so we need to, in addition to saying the things that work with our people who are already in the tent, the things like, we are the party of education. We are the party of healthcare. We are the party of human rights. I'm not saying that we abandon that. We embrace those things and celebrate them, but the people outside the tent, they want us to be the party of wage growth. They want us to be the party of affordability. They want us to be the party with a plan for the economy so they will continue working and their kids will have jobs as well. We have to stop running away from the economy and we have to start thinking the small economy if you're a relatively high income earner, comfortable middle class, inflation is
class is because of my husband.
It's
not because this business makes a lot of money. It's not. He is the primary. He is almost literally the sole breadwinner in our family. And he works in oil and gas. He's a mining engineer. So our family unit is like that. Right. Yeah.
So you're a comfortable middle class or upper middle class family. Right. And especially now in these inflationary times with the rising cost of living, there is a big distinction between the way you live your life and someone who works for $20 an hour. Right. So everyone's feeling the pinch of inflation and rising cost of living.
But the same groceries, right?
Yes. But the difference is that for you, it's a question of lost discretionary income.
Yes.
You have less discretionary income than you did a few years ago. But for a working class family, it's actually much more fundamental. It's about keeping a roof over your head. So if we don't become, and that's what the polls are telling us, the voters are saying this, they're saying we're drowning. The UCP is the government is supposed to help citizens when they're drowning. The UCP is throwing them anchors. We have to throw them a lifeline.
The UCP is even throwing them an anchor, to be honest.
They're not doing anything.
No, they're not. There's no life preserver coming. They're just like, pull yourself up.
So that's why that in addition to being the party that defends human rights and public education and healthcare, we have to be the party that guarantees affordability. And there are things that we can do. It's not just talking about it.
The UCP isn't making life more affordable.
But that's why, like when I released my affordability platform, I said we need to introduce public auto insurance because it's cheaper. We need to re-regulate our power system because it's cheaper. And these are not radical ideas. Like every other province other than Alberta has a regulated power system and it's cheaper. Every other Western province has public auto insurance and it's cheaper. These are not radical, crazy ideas, but they would make a big difference in the lives of the people who are struggling most. And then there's housing.
Perception, right? It's the perception of publicly managed or owned crown corporations, right? And the demonization of them. And there is the hypocrisy of it is that, the UCP is actually creating more in like bureaucracy, right? With all of these like
changes in healthcare.
Just they're literally creating red tape and barriers. But people are willing to give them a pass on it because it's the UCP and they think that it's good for the economy and good for business and maybe good for them, even when it's not.
That is the central issue that we have to come to terms with as an NDP.
Is like, well, no, the expectation is that you're bad with money. You're bad for the economy. Of course, you're going to create more bureaucracy. Of course, you're going to create more red tape, and bringing people, how you bring people along to realize that that's actually not like, maybe, like maybe there might be a little bit of that, but it's actually beneficial to them.
Oh yeah. And I think that that's actually one of the biggest priorities for the New Democrats going forward into the next election and beyond. We have to stop ceding the field to the UCP on the economy. We have to be loud and proud that we have an alternative to the economy that's actually better than the conservative one. I mean, like if you talk to economists, right across the spectrum, economists will agree that if you want to have a strong economy, you have to have a productive economy. And they also agree that the roots of productivity actually lie in investment in like you have a more productive.
We also have horrible personal productivity in Canada.
Yeah, but this is the point. This is the point I want to make. We like in order to be a productive economy, you have to invest in people and infrastructure. So you have to invest in things like
you have to make money as a small business owner. It's right. You have to make money to be able to invest.
But you also have to invest money to make money. And so
it's a vicious combination.
Yeah, but economists will agree that you have to invest in university research and skills training and innovation in infrastructure.
If you can.
These are all the things that the UCP has cut. So in the same, so they're actually the worst possible thing for the broader economy. Like it's not just that they're stopping investment in renewables. That's awful. They chase it, like instead of, the conservatives like to say they're open for business, but they're sending a message
it's closed.
That it's only open if you're one of their buddies in oil and gas, right? But they're also not investing in the foundations of prosperity, right? And whereas we could present ourselves as the party that would save oil and gas, which I've just said as a bold statement, and I think I can back it up. But we can also present ourselves as the party that knows how to build the foundations of economy and prosperity. But we haven't been doing that. And I've worked with the party for years in many different elections. Never once have we presented ourselves as the party that's better for the economy. If we did that, and in fact, I think if we did it in the last election, we would have won.
That this is where you should hone in on for the debates. I do think this would be your area of strength, like in this kind of messaging. But anyways, I've really enjoyed talking with you.
I really enjoyed this conversation too.
The back and forth. And so if someone wants to support you in your campaign, how do they do that?
So I have a campaign website, gilforalberta.ca.
And it's Gil with one L.
With one L.
Yes.
This has been the bane of my existence since I was a child. It's Gil, short for Gilbert. So Gil for Alberta. So
Got it.
Gil. And honestly, we do need donations. We're a small campaign.
Right.
We're not on the Nenshi train. If anything, we're probably getting run over by it. But if people like what they heard today and they want a progressive vision on the economy
for Albertans.
Well, here's the thing. I don't want to throw stones at my fellow candidates, but it's, we lost the last election in large part because we said what we were against, not what we were for. Now Naheed is saying Alberta, that he should be for Alberta, but that's not the same thing as saying what you're for. Saying that you're for Alberta is not the same thing as offering in concrete policies, right? It's just a slogan.
I agree with you.
So anyway, and I'm not sure people realize how expensive this race is. $60,000 just to be in the race, and so anything that's beyond that,
20.
And so our campaign raised the first installment of $20,000 in 4 days. It's taken us almost a month to get the second installment. And we still have one more hurdle to go over, and that doesn't even pay for things like our website and travel and.
Right, like
and people aren't seeing you don't see ads from us because honestly we can't afford them. Right. And unions can't pay for, even though I'm from the labor movement, the rules say that unions can't pay for this.
That would be a big no-no.
And a lot of our members, they're working people and they don't make a lot of money. And so I joked with Naheed at the beginning. I said, we all have to raise money from individuals, but your friends are richer than mine. And he laughed nervously, but didn't deny it.
Yeah.
So
You know, you run in big circles too, right? I'm sure you have. Anyways, this
yes.
isn't. It's not who knows more rich people, right?
Yeah,
It's not what it should be about.
it shouldn't be about
Yeah,
that. Yeah. So
yeah.
that's why I'm a little concerned, but with the size of the entry fee, that it's a kind of exclusionary. Actually.
Yeah, I mean, yes,
Yeah.
that's a whole other thing.
It's a
but
whole
you
other
can give that
discussion.
feedback to the NDP
I
and
have,
to
yeah.
their committees. But thank you for joining me
Yeah.
today, and I'm excited to see the debate.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. Thank you,
Yeah,
Sarah. Yeah.
thanks.